So I'm the narrator, and the slide pack is my distance tool, so to speak. So there's my artificially AI-generated dog and animation to go with it. So I've impressed you now of my keen use of this technology. So I'm going to give you a quick lead-in. So the lead-in says that we all know the date. ChatGPT arrives, the world goes into a frenzy, and Bill Gates comes out in March of 2023 and says that the age of AI has begun. And he compares ChatGPT to the significance of innovation as not seen since the integrated circuits of the 1980s, and the whole world is absolutely phenomenally in love with the idea of AI, Gen AI, scared of it in equal measure as fascinated by it. Some of the better quotes are by, for example, the late Henry Kissinger, who's a former Secretary of State, that talks about this new technology as a bid to transform the human cognitive process as it has not been shaken up since the invention of printing. So massive big claims here about the significance and the importance of this technology for our civilization. Note that there's no timelines. He didn't say in 2023, just to check, right? Or in 2024. He just sort of makes these big claims about the long-term value of what this might mean. And I think over the course of the last 18 months, for many of us in this room, we have kind of prodded and tested and experimented with generative AI and probably come to the similar type of conclusion, which is that it's a really good communication type a capability. I wouldn't even call it a tool yet. I would say it's a kind of capability that is really good at creating content, working with language, communication, whether we're talking about report writing or whether we're talking about kind of real-time conversations. And this idea that we can create now scalable communication is the core value proposition of this kind of technology today. In the future, it might be a reasoning engine. In the future, it could become a whole autonomous kind of death robot or whatever else that we think it might be. But today, it's just really good at communicating and sending out different kinds of reports and language and so on. And sure enough, that we start to witness an explosion of models over the last year and a half, and these models are getting bigger and better and chewing up CPU and GPU power and data and getting more and more sophisticated. Terms like GPT-5 become like amazements at nerd parties and everything. Everyone's kind of waiting for the next model to come along and give us the next sugar rush of what AI can do this time. Twitter feeds are packed with this as is social media because, the world is getting bigger and better. For the rest of us in the world of industry, we wonder how this genie in a bottle will ever be contained in a scalable, reliable way within an organization to add value. And again, just as this video would suggest, it's not clear yet how that might happen. So I'm going to go through these kinds of observations I've had regarding how the organizations I've spoken with and dealt with over the last year and a half have got AI wrong. These are purely personal observations. You might decide that none of these apply to you, that I'm dead wrong, and I welcome you to come after me after the session and force me to buy you a drink, which I'll happily do, to prove this point. But the whole point is that these are the kinds of things I've seen as to where the AI agenda falters. So I'm going to go through each one of these, but they're broadly going to be things like, don't worry about it because IT is looking at it, or we're testing some products, or we tested some products, but people don't really want it, so I guess it's not for us, or our data is a mess, so we're not really ready, to, I'm just not sure how it applies to me, says the executive, okay? I'm picking on executives. Clearly, we all know good executives and bad executives, so don't worry. So let's go through what this means. I think the number one thing is this idea that IT is looking at it. That it's kind of like something for the technology team because it's AI and tech and data. And so mentally, we have pushed it into that area. And so therefore, the implicit assumption for many organizations is it should sit with the CIOs, CTOs. Welcome to the party. Okay? It should be built up by that team. They should have to bear the burden of convincing us that it has value and convincing us how they're going to turn it into value. Because it's a technology tool. That technology tool is something that is special and unique to them. And so they're going to come to me in my business area and convince me that I should fund them or give them some resources or whatnot. And I have the right of refusal. Okay, so that's the kind of typical executive speak around this. I think in very few cases, you've got ideas where organizations have recognized that actually AI is not technology, it's business. It's a core enablement to the flow of business within an operation, and therefore individual business owners should be asking for it. The executive should be leading the transformation, and actually should have a decentralized model for AI. Decentralized meaning lots of little teams contain AI expertise, rather than only one team in the center having to contain all the AI expertise and walk around the organization trying to sell a bit of AI. You want some AI? Want some AI? I've got some AI. Yeah, I've got the really good AI, right? It's really, really difficult to do that. Obviously, what most of us have been talking about is this idea of the crowdsourced use case, right? So we just ask the staff to figure it out. It's very hard. So there's some enthusiastic young people out there somewhere, and they're going to get together on one of those Slack channels, and they're just going to talk about things, and it's going to be great, because they're going to experiment, and they're going to come back with us, and then they'll come up with something really innovative, and it'll be great. Okay? Yes, if you want incremental improvements of coffee roster scheduling assistance in the office, those are great. But if you want to reinvent your processes and how you do business and the strategic value that you expect to offer, especially for those industries that are heavily impacted by Gen AI, education, training, white-collar jobs, all those kinds of things, no, not so much. Okay? Don't get me wrong, there are some amazing things that come out of those groups, but it's a little bit like saying it's someone else's problem, and when it gets good enough, I'll take it over. Okay? We are testing product, classic kind of copilot approach. Not picking a Microsoft. Copilot can be anything. I'm not talking about the product Microsoft. I'm talking about the concept of a copilot. So we are going to test the product. We're going to do a co-working solution. It's a low-risk solution. Our people will just try and test it out, and we'll see what happens. Okay? It's low risk. We're not going to put anything crazy onto it. We'll put like policy documents and HR policies on it, and our people can ask about HR policies. So that will help with the HR team, freeing up some time, and we'll be good, right? It's low risk, low economic value, kind of sideline projects. What did we do? We rolled it out. Turns out it actually wasn't as easy as we thought. Our people didn't really want to use it because there's behavioral training that was involved. They didn't really know how to use it. They kind of tried it once, didn't quite work, and the responses were highly varied. And we're not even sure what the skills training that we're going to have to do. We went back to HR. We said to them, how are we going to train our people to use this thing? HR went, I don't know, because it's too early. And so it feels like actually, even though we tested it, it didn't really work. So we're not sure whether the problem is with the product or with our people or with the technology, but our first run at it just didn't feel like it's successful. We weren't left feeling with a positive thought. On the other hand, the research that has come out, about 31,000 people in 31 countries. I love how they lined it up. That's really cool. It's very systematic, isn't it, really? LinkedIn Microsoft Releases says that 75% of knowledge workers, specifically knowledge workers, white collar, now use AI at work, okay? And 60% of them say that the company lacks a vision and a plan to implement it. So yeah, individuals, it's a bit like blockchain and crypto, individuals are loving it, and everyone's kind of doing stuff on the side, but from a mainstream perspective, a systematic adoption perspective, not so much, okay? And this idea that when an organization rolls out Microsoft Word or Excel 30 years ago, I'm sure it was a revelation, and we had to go through this idea of what is an Excel spreadsheet and why should we train people on it. In the same kind of way, I suspect that we've got this kind of lead lag problem when we're trying to roll out a capability. It's still a capability masquerading as a product without the skill sets and without the frameworks to support it. Did your people ask for AI solutions? So this is a classic case. Our people are not using it. We said to them, it's great. We held a workshop. We did a seminar. I happen to have some experience firsthand with this with an unnamed organization, really well paid, lovely organization, high-skilled workers, and they were like, love the workshop, rated it really high, people are not using it, okay? And the question is why? And there's a whole heap of reasons, but I think one of the most pervasive ones I've come across is this idea that the narrative behind AI is still quite negative. AI does not fill people with happiness for the future. If I asked you, in 3 years' time, we're going to have a lot more AI in this world, what are you seeing in front of your eyes? I'm guessing the answer is not going to be running down the beach next to a Terminator-like figure, holding hands, or for a Terminator-like figure to be carrying you in its arms, or whatever else it is. None of these things are positive visions. We have a tirade of negative visions from social media, from sci-fi, from everything else about seeking control and the idea of who has control. AI will take my job. It will take my autonomy, my agency. It will manipulate me, control me, minoritize me. It's a tool of big corporations. It's a tool of my company. to somehow dispossess me. These are really common narratives, okay? And so I think there has to be an awareness that when you're saying we're going to roll out AI solution, the average person in the average company is not going to go, yay, my job is safe. In fact, probably quite the contrary. There's a great use case study. There was a paper that was released. There's a October 2023 Gen AI work. It was a study that was done on the cusp of Gen AI, so a little bit before it as well. And it was a study done based on 5,200 customer service agents in the Philippines that were helping a US SaaS company do customer service for their people, right? And so what they did is they kind of created a copilot for these customer service agents. So the average call would last for 40 minutes, okay? And this would be the call agents helping the customers navigate through the SaaS to solve their problems or to utilize it for what they wanted to. And what they found is that overall, there was just a 14% improvement, 14% improvement across the whole business for having rolled out this kind of copilot ChatGPT-like solution that would help customer service agents service people. But what they found is that clearly, there was a massive difference pre and post AI usage. So the red sort of normal distribution in the middle is pre-AI, the blue one is post-AI, and then the green one is didn't use AI. So you went from essentially to the right-hand side, which means that you've got more resolutions per hour, you've got better quality, average handle time is down, share resolved. There's a bunch of other graphics here which talk about the fact that the conversations were better, higher quality, led to less kind of incidents and so on. So why wasn't everybody using it? It's a great tool. There's clearly, definitively a value proposition here. And what they found was that the juniors who were new to the job were happy to use it and got an uplift of 30, 40% in capability, in everything. The experienced workers did not want to use any of it. They zeroed it. They said, I know better. Okay, so it's not as easy as putting a tool in front of somebody and saying, here you go, use this, because it's kind of better than you sometimes. In most of the cases, you have to do a lot more than that to unpack the motivations of that individual to use the tool, to get better, the culture of getting better, to be, the KPIs to align for efficiency and all those kinds of things. So I think it's a really interesting study of how a well-intended, well-executed AI rollout for a good use case of customer service fell on its head. And sure enough, here's Bill Gates, but 9 months later saying, even though I thought the age of AI had begun, it actually hasn't begun yet. Because it turns out that my old habits are hard to break. Okay? And so again, you're talking about somebody who's at the coalface of technology, thinking about using it, probably up on the intelligence spectrum and so on, still struggling with their habits and how they use technology. There's a couple of interesting things about, I'm going to reference an earlier paper. We put out a thought leadership paper with ADAPT, which was around why AI and data are not the same. It's a great little paper. But one of the rules from that was about the value of human capital, and that you cannot essentially roll out any kind of co-working or co-integrated AI solution without your people being part of that solution. Not just in terms of being the recipients of it, but being brought into it, by actually walking with you through the whole process and being happy for it. Right? If you can walk into a room before you delivered a technology project, and for the people in that room to go, when are we getting our AI? That's when you know you got it right. If they're sitting in there going, okay, what are you going to give me? Really? No. You need to unwind that really quickly. Do not enter with an AI I suppose, a product, trying to solve the problem and thinking that people will just get in line. They won't. In fact, if anything, they'll push back even harder. And then this idea that AI comes after data. So that's a really common misconception. And it basically says, we're not ready for AI because our data is a mess. So if AI is the building block, data is the building block, then AI must be our penthouse. And we're not ready for the penthouse. We're still trying to get the brickwork and the foundations in place. So give us a few more years, right? We spent a lot of money on this already. All the budget's gone. It's going to take us a while, right? And I think that would be right if I was talking about older or classic AI or machine learning or statistical systems, where I would be telling you that you have to use your own data to create your own model. But that's not what we're saying with Gen AI. With Gen AI, what we're saying is you're taking a model off the shelf and you're plugging it into a very, very small part of your data, which is normally already well contained within PDF and documents because it already exists, because your everyday workforce is using it. Okay, so if you're talking about using generative AI either as a communication engine or as a knowledge management, which are the kind of usual kind of use cases we see, then you've already got the data that feeds into that, just your people, and all you're doing is plugging it into these models from having plugged it into people. There's really not much more to do other than guardrailing and usual kind of prompt setup and so on. So in this particular case, generative AI specifically is not necessarily a product of your data, because you're going to take it off the shelf and you're going to plug it in. Okay, so it's not the same as what it would be in the previous cases. I think this is the really hard one, and I almost kind of feel bad about bringing this one up because it's almost like in my mind, almost an impossible thing to aspire to if you're an organization, which is a company that understands their own workflows. Like modern organizations are complex beasts. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things. There's a lot of emails flying about. There's a lot of files flying around. There's a lot of product services, conversations, alignments. There's a virtual spaghetti of products and processes that work interwoven. It's not easy, okay? For those of you that went through robotic process automation stuff, when that was really popular, you would have kind of found firsthand experience that extracting these work processes is difficult. So the idea of I'm just not sure how it applies to me actually tells me that you don't fully understand your workflow, or you haven't really thought about your workflow in that kind of itemized way, where you kind of extract it and go, this is how we're going to do. Now, there was a wonderful comment earlier today that said, really, the best advice that could be provided is that AI is useful if you are to understand the business. If you understand the business, if you're close to the business, in my interpretation, that's understanding the workflow of how a business is done, how a service is produced, a product is created, and so on, then it's easy for you to drop in AI as part of that. So let me give you a quick analogy. If you're a builder, better yet, you're a real estate agent. Your job is to show people around property. So well done, great job, right? I come to your organization and go, here's some silicon. That's not a recognizable product for you. Your recognizable products are houses, garages, brochures, but I'm saying to you silicon. You need silicon. Okay, you don't know how to have that conversation with me. If I were to tell you need silicon in order to get your windows, not to let in water and air and so on, that might start to make more sense. And if I said to you that because of silicon you can sell 20% more houses, that will make a lot more sense. Because your language is only contained to houses and housing sales, and at the periphery elements of houses like windows and doors. But your language does not contain the next level of elements, which are the ingredients that go into doors and windows and so on, which are like things like silicon, plastics, and so on. So normally, organizations don't really fully understand their own workflows, so when the concept of AI is brought into an executive or a board meeting, they kind of look at you and go, I don't understand what you're saying. And moreover, my brain doesn't really want to understand it either. So you need to kind of give me something that's a lot more recognizable within that business context, otherwise they feel academic. And the amount of presentations I've been in with well-meaning technologists where you've gone too far. You didn't even realize that you went too far, and you went too far and you lost the room within 30 seconds. Is really common. So executives have rarely seen tamed versions of AI. This is important. I worked in a quant shop for many years. My job was to manage large amounts of quantitative money, so billions and billions of dollars running on semi-automated algorithms. I know what an automated company looks like simply because I've worked in the industry. I have a mental vision of it, great. I'm 1% of the workforce, if that. Okay, so the other 99% have never seen it in action, never have touched it in action, never have felt it in action. So you're trying to sell to them a dream that they just haven't seen before, or a version of the workforce that they might recognize, but they just haven't seen before. So I think I'm now happily on my last two slides. I was worried I couldn't get through 30 minutes, but it turns out that if you just speed run through slides, you can get to anything you want, which is great. So I want to take a big pause and a breath here to say, look, AI gets called many things. There's a narrative about AI that says it's a co-working solution. There's a narrative that says that it's only for the stuff we don't want to do, for the unexciting kind of stuff, and then we get to do the more strategic and interesting stuff. Some of these narratives are motivated by what the AI system can actually do, automate mundane tasks, generative AI, and so on. But a lot of them are not motivated by that. They're motivated by sales pitches or by easy to understand and easy to process ideas behind it, right? This idea of rubbish in, rubbish out is a nuanced statement. It's actually not true in its absolute form. You can get really good data in, have rubbish out as well, in many cases, as we know, right? So these are kind of heuristic shortcuts that we take when we're talking about complex topics like AI. And I think we need to move past that, because in order for us to put business intelligence and AI together and actually have conversations with business that says, why do you do what you do and how you do, you need to get down to the core value proposition and then pepper in AI where possible. To be able to do that, you can't rely upon these backhand comments that you might get in executive or board meetings. You need to correct them. You need to get into nuance. You need to point the finger back going, this is not an IT thing. This is a business thing. Okay? And for many boards and executives, that's a journey in the sense that they're going to need to hear it 10 or 15 times from you. And the 16th time, they might click and go, OK, I know what you said about that thing. OK, you got me. So what Gen AI, for me, represents, and I think I need to kind of give you a little bit of, I suppose, positivity at the end to say, this is why it's meaningful. This is not another incremental step in the journey of AI. In my career, ever since I've done my PhD and ever since I've walked through my career in various different forms, I've never seen a technology like this in terms of capability and uplift. And the idea that it can learn human language and that it can represent ideas thoughtfully, carefully across vision, across video, across voice, across text, across all these different dimensions is simply something we've never had in human history. So it's okay that we take a little bit longer to put it into our organizations. It's okay that it takes a little bit longer for us to adapt to people and so on. This is not a sprint. I don't think we've failed in any way because in the last 18 months, we haven't convinced all of our organizations to suddenly start jumping on Gen AI. Right? Although I know that for the average technology salesperson, they've got quarterly targets to meet. I think for everybody else, this is going to be a gradual process, but it's going to be unrecognizable as to where we're going to get to. And I think kind of in my last minute and a half, what I want to say is that while it's still uncertain as to where Gen AI will end up at, and this is why I keep talking about it as a capability, but not yet as a product or a solution or something that is absolutely set. This is why I don't like using the word tool, because even the word tool implies that it is complete, like a shovel would be, and now your job is just to learn how to shovel things. This is not complete yet. But we do know things that it isn't as a result. We know that it isn't data. We can't treat it like data in terms of policies, in terms of the way that we think about its cleanliness and so on. We know it's not a single use case. I can name you dozens of use cases I've run across that are all legitimate, have their faults, but need to be worked through. It isn't a single case study. For most industries, for maybe some select industries it could be, but for many it isn't. It isn't automation, because right now we don't have the risk-bearing capacity to understand where it hallucinates and makes mistakes. And what we do know is that it isn't plug and play. It's not a product that we put next to our workforce. They happily pick and gingerly pick it up, and day two they are more productive than they've ever been before. Okay? So for most of our workforce and most of it, it's something that we're going to have to be training with and going along that particular path with.